Everyone avoided the rude billionaire until a new black waitress stood her ground. And trust me, what happened next changed not just her life, but the entire restaurant's reputation forever. His name was Preston Hale, a man whose wealth could buy entire city blocks, but whose temper could clear a room faster than a fire alarm. For years, he came to the same high-end restaurant every Friday night, sitting at the same corner table with a perfect view of the entire dining room. And for years, the staff had learned to live in fear of him. They whispered about him in the kitchen, warning every new hire. Don't mess up Preston's order. Don't make eye contact unless he speaks to you. And whatever you do, don't take too long. Rumor had it he had gotten 2 waiters fired in one night just because his steak was slightly overcooked, and he once threw a wine glass at the floor when the bottle wasn't chilled to his exact preference. Everyone dreaded his visits. Everyone except Zoe, the new waitress who had just been hired 2 weeks ago. Zoe came from a background where standing up for herself wasn't optional, it was survival. She had worked in 3 diners, 2 cafes, and a greasy fast food joint before landing this job. And though she was grateful for the fancy uniform and bigger tips, she wasn't about to let some billionaire treat her like she was invisible. The night Preston walked in, Zoe could feel the entire staff stiffen. The hostess's hands shook as she seated him, the bartender avoided his gaze, and even the manager peeked nervously from his office door. Zoe grabbed her notepad, took a deep breath, and decided she wasn't going to play the scared game. When she approached his table, Preston didn't even look at her. He just snapped his fingers and said, "Scotch." Neat. Most waiters would have run to the bar, but Zoe stood her ground, pen still poised, and asked, "Which label, sir?" "We have Macallan 12, 18, and Blue Label." Preston finally looked up, frown forming, as if he wasn't used to being questioned. "The 18, he said curtly, "and make it fast." Zoe nodded, unfazed, and returned a minute later with the drink. She set it down with a calm smile and said, "Your food, order when you're ready." Preston tested her with a long silence before saying, "Steak. Medium rare. Don't ruin it." Zoe didn't flinch, didn't grovel, just wrote it down and repeated it back to confirm. For the next 20 minutes, she went about her other tables, checking on Preston occasionally, but never hovering, never shrinking. When the food arrived, Preston cut into the steak, frowned slightly, and called her over. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. This was usually the moment of disaster. "This is more medium than medium rare," he said, voice low and dangerous. Most servers would have panicked and run to the kitchen, but Zoe leaned slightly closer and said respectfully, "Thank you for letting me know, sir. I can have a new one fired right away if you'd like, and we'll keep this one on the house." That direct, confident answer seemed to throw him off guard. He expected fear. Instead, he got professionalism. Preston waved his hand dismissively. "Fine, bring me another." Zoe whisked it away, relayed the order, and kept checking back until it was perfect. When she delivered the replacement steak, Preston examined it, then took a bite. Slowly, his scowl faded. "Better," he said, and then, for the first time in memory, left a tip. Not just any tip, a generous one. The staff nearly fainted when they saw it. Over the next few weeks, Preston kept coming in, and he requested Zoe personally every single time. At first, it was just the same routine: steak, scotch, silence. But then he started asking questions. "Where are you from?" he asked one night. "South Side," Zoe answered simply. "Big family." "For siblings," she said. "I'm the oldest." Something softened in Preston's expression. He started coming more often, sometimes twice a week, always tipping big, always watching Zoe work. One Friday, Zoe noticed he seemed off. His usual sharp suit was a little wrinkled, his eyes tired. When she asked if he wanted his usual drink, he hesitated and said, "Tea. Just tea tonight." Zoe didn't pry, but she did bring him a warm slice of apple pie on the house. Preston blinked at it and asked, "Why?" Zoe shrugged. "Because you look like you need it." For the first time anyone could remember, Preston laughed. Not a cruel laugh, a real one. Over time, Preston's reputation began to shift. The other waiters noticed he wasn't snapping as much, wasn't throwing glasses anymore. He still had his moments, but Zoe had a way of defusing him with calm, steady respect. One night, a new waiter accidentally spilled water on Preston's expensive suit. The entire restaurant froze, expecting an explosion. Preston started to rise, face dark, but then Zoe stepped in, put a hand on the waiter's shoulder, and said, "I'll handle it." She apologized once, offered to comp the meal, and Preston, instead of yelling, just sat back down and said, "Fine. Accidents happen." Everyone's jaws dropped. Eventually, Preston began sitting at the counter instead of his isolated table, chatting with Zoe while she worked. One evening, he admitted, "You know, I used to hate coming here. I only came out of habit. Everyone was scared of me, and I guess I liked that. But you," he gestured at her, "you treat me like a person, not just a problem to avoid." Zoe smiled. "Maybe that's because I know what it's like to be treated like I don't matter." That night, Preston left a tip so big Zoe cried in the back room, enough to pay off 2 months of her rent. But the real change came the night the restaurant's owner decided to fire Zoe after a mix-up that wasn't even her fault. Preston happened to be there and saw the whole thing. Before Zoe could even speak, Preston stood, turned to the owner, and said, "If she goes, so does my business, and my friend's business, and everyone I know. Do you really want to lose your biggest client over a mistake that wasn't even hers?" The owner paled, stammered, and immediately reversed the decision. Zoe kept her job and her dignity, thanks to the same man who once terrified every employee. In time, Zoe got promoted to floor manager, and Preston kept coming. But now he smiled when he walked in, chatted with the staff, and even donated money to fix up the building's kitchen. The man who once inspired fear became someone people actually looked forward to seeing. And it all started because one young waitress refused to be intimidated and chose to treat him like a human being, even when no one else dared.